Daniel sat up in bed, drenched in sweat. His heart raced as the last remnants of the nightmare faded, leaving behind a lingering sense of dread. The room was still, eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of the city outside. But there was something else, something off about the silence. It felt heavy, oppressive. He glanced at the empty side of the bed where his wife, Sarah, used to sleep before she had left him. Even now, after everything that had happened, he missed her presence. His hand ran over the cold sheets, but instead of comforting him, the touch sent a shiver down his spine. It was the third night in a row he had woken up like this, feeling as though someone was watching him. The nightmares had started about a month ago, shortly after Sarah had packed her things and walked out the door. They were not just dreams, they felt real, and tonight, the same face had appeared again. The man with hollow, accusing eyes. The man Daniel had hoped he would never have to think about again. Daniel got out of bed, his body tense with unease, and padded to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water, trying to shake off the nagging sense that something was wrong. As he sipped, his eyes fell on the photo on the fridge, a relic from a happier time. It was of him and Sarah, arms wrapped around each other, smiling like nothing could ever tear them apart. But that was before the affair, before Andrew. A gust of cold air swept through the room, causing Daniel to freeze. The windows were closed. How was there a draft? Suddenly, the lights flickered. He turned around, his pulse quickening, scanning the room for anything out of place. Nothing. But then, just as he took a step forward, he heard a faint whisper, low and menacing. "You shouldn't have done it, Daniel." The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. His chest tightened, panic rising like bile in his throat. He knew that voice. He knew it all too well. "Andrew?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The whisper came again, this time clearer, closer. "You killed me." Months earlier, Daniel's life had spiraled into chaos. He'd found out about Sarah's affair with Andrew through a series of late-night texts, suspicious phone calls, and Sarah's increasing distance. The betrayal had eaten away at him, night after night, until he finally confronted her. The argument had been explosive, raw with emotion and accusations. But what had happened afterward, Daniel could never have anticipated. He had not meant for it to go that far. Daniel remembered that night with a sickening clarity. He had confronted Andrew. Things escalated quickly, fists flying, anger boiling over. He had not planned to kill him. It had been an accident. Andrew had hit his head on the concrete floor of the garage, the sound echoing in Daniel's ears long after the fight had ended. The moment Andrew's body went limp, a wave of terror and guilt consumed Daniel. He had not told anyone, not even Sarah. He buried the truth, along with Andrew, in a shallow grave outside of town, hoping to bury the guilt with it. But the guilt didn't stay buried. Now, standing in his dark kitchen, Daniel felt the walls closing in on him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his shaking hands. Maybe it was just his mind playing tricks on him. Maybe the guilt was eating him alive, making him hear things that weren't there. But as he turned to leave the kitchen, something stopped him dead in his tracks. A figure stood in the doorway, a silhouette draped in shadow, watching him. Daniel's heart stopped. It was Andrew. Pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes and a bloodied face. The very same face Daniel had seen in his nightmares. Only this time, Andrew wasn't confined to his dreams. "You think you can just forget what you did?" Andrew's voice was ice, his presence heavy, suffocating. "You think you can walk away?" Daniel stumbled backward, his mind reeling. "You're not real. You can't be real." But the figure didn't waver. Instead, it took a step closer, the air growing colder with every inch. "You took everything from me, Daniel. My life, my future. And now, it's time for you to pay." "No." Daniel's voice cracked, tears stinging his eyes. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to. Liar." Andrew's voice hissed, rage burning behind those dead eyes. "You knew. You knew the moment you hit me." Daniel felt the weight of his guilt crashing down on him. He couldn't escape this. He couldn't escape Andrew. The past wouldn't let him go. The haunting continued over the next several days. Every night, Andrew appeared, his ghostly form tormenting Daniel, filling his mind with whispers and threats. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut without warning, and the temperature would plummet whenever Andrew was near. At first, Daniel tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself that it was all in his head. But the encounters became more intense, more violent. He found scratches on his arms, bruises that he couldn't explain. And the more Andrew tormented him, the more Daniel felt his sanity slipping away. Desperate, Daniel reached out to Sarah, the only person who might understand. Maybe she knew something. Maybe there was something she hadn't told him about Andrew, something that could explain why his ghost was haunting him. Sarah agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe, her face pale when she saw him. They hadn't spoken since the breakup, and the tension between them was palpable. "What's going on, Daniel?" she asked, her voice wary. "You sounded scared." Daniel swallowed, his eyes darting around the crowded cafe. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Sarah frowned, her fingers nervously playing with the edge of her coffee cup. "What is it?" He leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "Did you know about Andrew, about what happened to him?" Sarah froze, her eyes widening in shock. "What are you talking about?" "Andrew. He disappeared. No one knows what happened to him." Daniel's heart sank. She didn't know. She didn't know that Andrew was dead, that he had killed him. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as the truth spilled out of him, the weight of his secret too much to bear any longer. He told her everything about the fight, about Andrew's death, about how he had buried the body and kept it hidden from everyone. As he spoke, Sarah's face turned ashen, her hands trembling. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "What have you done?" "I didn't mean to," Daniel said, choking on the words. "It was an accident. I swear. But now, he's haunting me, Sarah. He wants revenge." Sarah stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and horror. "A ghost, Daniel, that's insane. You're not thinking straight." But Daniel knew what he had seen. He knew Andrew's ghost was real. And no matter what Sarah thought, no matter how much she tried to rationalize it, the truth was undeniable. That night, as Daniel lay in bed, he braced himself for Andrew's return. The haunting had escalated to the point where he could barely sleep, barely function. Andrew's rage had become all-consuming, and Daniel knew he couldn't run from it any longer. The cold air seeped into the room, and Daniel's breath came out in shaky gasps. He didn't have to wait long. Andrew appeared at the foot of his bed, his pale form looming over him like a specter of vengeance. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel cried, his voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" Andrew's eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "I want justice." Daniel's heart raced. "Then take me and end this." Andrew's ghost flickered, his form distorting. And then, to Daniel's horror, he realized the truth, the final, sickening twist in the nightmare that had consumed him. It wasn't Andrew's ghost that had haunted him, it was his own guilt, his own mind punishing him for what he had done. The figure before him wasn't real, it never had been. As the truth dawned on him, Daniel's world crumbled. He had destroyed everything, his marriage, his sanity, his life, all because of his own actions. There was no escape from the consequences of his choices, no matter how much he had tried to bury them. In the end, the ghost that had haunted him wasn't a spirit seeking revenge. It was the darkest part of himself, the part he could never outrun. And now, there was no turning back.